Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent movies that goes beyond basic film criticism to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole, and with me today is...
Lexy.
What movie are we overanalyzing this week?
We're talking about Dumb Money.
Yes. Dumb Money, directed by Craig Gillespie, is the ultimate David versus Goliath tale, based on the insane true story of everyday people who flipped the script on Wall Street and got rich by turning GameStop into the world's hottest company. What did you think? I
liked it. It's a very internet movie.
Okay.
Like lots of, it's very focused on Reddit. And so there's a lot of memes.
Yes.
There's a lot of clips that are...
Reddit and TikTok.
Yes, yeah, Reddit and TikTok. There's a lot of clips, a lot of references. I mean, yeah, this only happened like a little over a year ago, or I guess a year and a half ago at this point.
They got this movie out fast.
Yes, they did, yeah. And I think Seth Rogen was, while he was in it, was also in some ways behind it, and so it's a comedy. And so, will I watch it again? I'm not sure, but I did enjoy while I was watching it.
Okay. I'm going Moms for Liberty on this movie. I want this movie banned.
Oh.
I think this movie is bad and dangerous, and I was super mad.
Okay, I didn't think you would be in love with it, but I didn't realize that you were going to hate it.
I was just... We'll get more into, like, the financial aspect, but I was just, like, sitting there cringing the whole time. And every time somebody said, I'm all in, I was like, stop saying that! Like, just, like, the David and Goliath plotline I found extremely problematic.
I do agree in the cringiness aspect of, like... You feel like, yeah, in the movie you follow obviously the main guy, was it Keith Gill?
Yeah.
Who, like, helped pioneer the interest in the stock.
Right.
But then you also follow, other regular people who are part of the Reddit, the subreddit Wall Street Bets, and you kind of have these other through lines through the story. I do agree with the cringiness of, like, you're listening to them make some of these decisions, and I'm like, no! Just sell even a little bit already. Just sell some.
Just sell. I was like freaking out.
Like, I understand, like, there's this group mentality, but sell some of it.
Yeah.
Like, this could change your life.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll circle back to the theme in the broader, but let's, like, talk about it as a movie. I did find the pacing a little bit slow. I started to kind of, I had a hard time connecting with all of the different characters.
Yeah, I think I knew about the story when it was happening, but I didn't follow this guy very much in depth, but I thought Paul Dano definitely played, the kind of awkward guy pretty well, and at least based on the clips that they play at the end of the movie and that are similar to what happened in the movie, I thought, based on that at least, that the actors seemed like they did a good job and were cast pretty well. But it's an interesting ensemble.
Right. So, America Ferrera is just going to be likable in whatever she's in, and she's playing a single mom, so, like, you already have that kind of, and a healthcare worker.
I was mad but for the financial stuff, I was mad at her fairly frequently.
Especially because she had one entire voice of reason the entire time.
Yep.
That she firmly ignored. The college girls, they just weren't fleshed out enough to be interesting.
Yeah.
I felt like a lot of the finance people weren't really fleshed out enough to be interesting.
Yeah, you could definitely see the typecasting happening.
Yeah, it was like it's a trope and not really a person.
Right. I do agree, yeah.
Pete Davidson was just annoying, and I don't know why he was in this movie. Like, his comic relief was not comic. I don't I didn't care for that, but
I find him funny, at least in this role. He's playing himself to me. Like, I'm like, Pete Davidson is Pete Davidson, and he's good at being Pete Davidson.
Right. And like Seth Rogen is Seth Rogen, and he's good at being Seth Rogen, and everyone's like, ooh, Seth Rogen plays against type. I'm like, proving he can't really act. Like,
yeah, I'm like, I guess he's like he is more against type, but he's not really like that far.
I did think that one of the, like, there are a couple of characterizations I really did like. So Emma Thompson once described going through her sort of like 30s and getting offered a lot of don't go do that brave thing parts, which is like a lot of the, like, the women, the girlfriend, the wife.
Right.
The main character, the lead male, has this, like, great idea.
Yeah.
And the wife's there to be like, no, it's too risky. Don't do it. And, like, she was like, I don't want to be that. I don't want to play that part in a movie ever. That part sucks and I don't want to do it. So I was like, really interestingly, in this movie, you actually have the wife on his side 100%, like totally backing him up, and she never says this is a bad idea, don't do it. Like,
yeah, there's a bit of hesitation. It's not to the same level as like,
yeah. And I'm like, she's for the most part supportive. There's a discussion. You see it as a partnership. And even, like the woman who plays like the wife character of Seth Rogen, she's even like, okay, you've really screwed this up.
She's pretty calm the whole time.
Yeah. And I was like, way to not, like, fall into that sort of misogynist trap of, like, making the wife character, like, the nag or the naysayer.
Yeah, I can see that and appreciate it. Maybe I'm projecting my own feelings. I feel like no one would have been that calm. At least on the
up $32 million.
Yeah, at least Gil's wife.
We
don't see a ton of Seth Rogen's wife, but for Shailene Woodley's character, I'm like, I partially was like, I cannot believe this because she is like so calm. But that might be my own feelings towards how I'd react in that situation.
Yeah, and this is like, so I'm going to be upfront about bias. A few years ago, a coworker, we were talking about Robinhood, and he, like, showed me this, like, email marketing message he had gotten from Robinhood, and it was like, dude, you don't want to be the, like, beta male who misses out on investing. I don't know. God. It was, like, offensively bro-y.
Oh, my God.
And I just, like, looked at this marketing, and I was like, I mean, I hope this is targeted advertising. Like, I hope they did not send it to any female on their list, because this just makes me hate you.
Yeah. And I thought, and it was funny to see, I think it's Sebastian Stan play the Robinhood CEO, because he was the right amount of cringe, but I think it was right for the role.
Yeah, I thought he was excellent, and I thought there were, like, a couple of moments, like when he just puts his hand on his partner's shoulder. Like, there are these moments of, like, dominance that he's exerting over his partner that I thought were extremely well played, I was, like, ready to hate him already, so I admit that up front. I was ready for him to be hateable.
And when they're driving together out with the 2 Teslas.
Like, they were hateable and they were great.
Yeah.
So it's like, I can't fault the performances at all. I just think some of the people were, like, kind of underwritten.
Yeah, I think the comedy was enough for me that it didn't matter a ton. And I think that's also part of why I'm like, I had a good time, but I'm not going to probably see this movie again because, the characters were more tropish in some ways and were, lacking because they were kind of had this ensemble cast going on, but I've seen way better ensemble casts in different movies.
Yeah. And I just felt like, I mean, like, Vincent D'Onofrio was just really wasted, as was...
he didn't need to be there.
What's his name?
It's really just Nick
Offerman,
Yeah, Nick Offerman and Seth Rogen were really the main people.
I did like the net worth thing, though.
Yeah, I like that too. And yeah, I think some people, I don't know how many people are actually doing this, but I think people, because it's a finance movie that is comedy based, people compare it to The Big Short.
Yeah.
And I think there are some similarities, but I do think there are definitely different movies that have different styles and goals in terms of, well, I guess both of them have a goal to educate about a particular event that happened, but The Big Short was, I think, more about teaching you about finance, whereas this was more just telling a story that happened recently.
Yeah, I mean, I think what makes The Big Short and makes every Michael Lewis book great is that what he does is he finds a story and he finds 3-ish people as a lens to tell that story through. So he finds these like really interesting characters in and of themselves to sort of tell you the story, right? So in The Big Short, he has these 3 different characters that all have this sort of counter take on the great financial crisis. And so, or on the housing bubble, I guess, before the crisis. So, and that is, I think that is part of the issue with this movie, and where you see like it's underwritten is like all those people were such fully realized interesting people, because that's kind of how Michael Lewis writes, and then translating from book to movie, you get to carry that along with you. In this, they just seem to pick kind of random people, and it was like, when
I was doing some research, it did seem that some of the characters were based on real people, but based on, this was also based off of a book. And I think they drew from characters in that. But yeah, I think like you have the main guy, Keith Gill, you have the 2 hedge fund investors, you have the college students, you have the GameStop employee, you have America Ferrera. Like we already have now 6, 7 characters that we're trying to follow to almost the same level of degree.
Right. And I do think, and the 2 guys from Robin Hood.
Oh, yeah. And then, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Or the one guy, basically. The second guy kind of is just there incidentally. Yeah, and I thought the movie struck a really nice balance of education and not just having a wall of exposition. Like, there were things they didn't explain. Like, they never tell you what an ape was.
I agree.
And I was like, good.
Yeah.
We can all look it up at home if we want to know all this, like, inside baseball Reddit terminology, right?
Yeah, you understand. Like, the main thing is the short squeeze. Mm-hmm. And throughout the movie, you understand at least what the short squeeze is.
Right.
And you understand why the hedge funds are losing a bunch of money, and you understand why everyone's gaining a bunch of money.
Right.
So yeah, I agree that it was a good balance. There were some lines, I don't know if it's just my own hearing, but there were certain lines that were delivered so quickly that I was like, what? Like, I didn't catch that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they did. Like, they kept it moving, and they tried not to overwhelm you with exposition, and I thought that that's not an easy thing to do in this situation, and you have to make a lot of deliberate choices about what to leave out and what to leave in, and I was like, I can't fault the movie for that, and I thought they did a good job with that.
Yeah, it's a quick laugh.
Yeah. And they also didn't shy away from the toxicity of Wall Street Bets as well, the sub. And I was like, good for them for acknowledging, like, it's a lot of sort of, again, edgelord tomfoolery stuff that is not palatable to your average person.
Yeah, Reddit.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Reddit can either be a great resource or a cesspool.
Right. And so, they were kind of trying to tell you this David and Goliath story, but they didn't sort of whitewash over David. And I was like, that's good. Like, I appreciated that they left that stuff in and that people called it out and were like, oh, that's like, this is what people are saying on this site. Like, you're really listening to these people? Like, and I was like, good for you.
Yeah, and definitely, especially in the beginning, is painted as like, you're a little weird for doing this.
Yeah.
I also think the movie did definitely, it's funny because Jake and I are having this discussion about just how time feels and how this movie it takes place, the big climax I think is like January of 21, which is a little over a year and a half ago. And it's funny because it was only a year and a half ago, but in some ways it seems very far away. And I did feel transported back, like, into that time. I thought the music was incorporated well. They had that early 2021, people were just getting vaccinated, so most people were still wearing masks. And there's a lot of comments about, like, put the mask up and all of those kind of little intricacies. And so it's weird because it wasn't long ago, but the movie definitely, with certain choices that it made, brought me like right back to that time period.
Yeah, I thought it did the pandemic well as well. And I also would agree with you that it was like, in my mind, I know it wasn't that long ago and it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah.
It feels like the way distant past. Like,
mm-hmm.
And it did force you to be like, oh God, remember when we had to wear a mask all the time when we were in public?
Yeah.
We'd ride the metro with masks on? Like, yeah, for sure. I thought that too. Yeah, it was... I wonder, though, if that will be slightly its downfall. If it will just come across as, like, dated and so of the moment. That we'll miss the larger picture of it. Because, again, I strongly disagree with the messaging in this movie, but what is actually undeniable was, like, the whole notion of a meme stock. Like, this was actually a pretty important event in history.
Yeah. I mean, some things happen on the internet and they stay on the internet. And then some things break that mold and go out into the quote-unquote real world. And this, like... especially, I think, after a certain point, was a story that was going on for months, and there was a congressional hearing, and it's about a very specific, time period.
Right, but, like, people still do this now. Like, then they did it to AMC. Like, they've picked other stocks since GameStop. Like, it's...
Yes, yeah.
The phenomenon continues, and, like,
mm-hmm.
At some point, that, like, the idea of a meme stock is just getting passed into just regular financial lexicon, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I do think that it's just weird. It was so fast. It's like, it just happened.
Yeah, part of me was like, why are they even making this movie right now?
Yeah.
Like, we were just here.
Right. And do we really have the perspective necessary to look back on this? I'm not sure.
Yeah. And... yeah, I think with the more comedy aspect and parts of the movie not being taken very seriously, I don't know if it would have included perspective even if it was in the future. But yeah, I think you're right. Like, things will always look a little different, as more time passes.
Yeah.
And you think about it more.
Yeah. So, I mean, most of it, like, I don't have a lot of, like, very technical criticisms or praise one way or the other.
Yeah,
it was a workmanlike movie. There was a lot of desaturation, grayed out. It's winter, we're poor, and I'm
right. We're in a smaller town in Massachusetts.
So we had Brockton, Massachusetts. We had Austin, Texas. We had Pittsburgh, where America Ferrera was.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And Detroit, where the GameStop store was.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, like, they didn't pick anything on the, like, East Coast. Well, they picked Brockton, but I was like, they picked very sort of blue-collar settings in a way. Maybe arguably not Austin, but it was sort of a very pointed way of telling this story.
Mm-hmm.
So my issue with this movie is the movie's called Dumb Money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a derogatory way that, like, financial professionals refer to so-called retail investors, individual investors. And all this movie did was prove that right.
Yeah, I guess it's funny because I came in it's about money, and I came into this thinking that I would be talking about money, but kind of as we alluded to, it's not a ton about money. It's really like the movie to me seems like more like it's a David and Goliath story, or like it's a very like anti-establishment story. It's, you know, about the little guy rising up. Like it's set through this like money tale, but I feel like leaving it, I wasn't thinking a lot about money. I was thinking more about like the internet and how things like transpire on the internet and then make their way to the real world, and then kind of the general state of not trusting things and not trusting different sources.
Yeah, I mean, I think all of that is true, but I think that is the downfall of the movie and like why I'm so mad about it. Like you alluded to this before, I am now showing Lexi my notes where I have like double underlined some. The number of times someone was like, I'm all in. I was like, don't be all in. That's not how you do investing.
No, yeah.
Like it was all of like, so you had the one character who was like America Ferrera's coworker, who was like the voice of reason, going like, "This is a bad idea. Why don't you just sell some of the stock? Like
your kid needs
braces.
Catch
up now." Like, I was just like, all of this is good advice, and it's not being presented as good advice,
right?
But what happens
this is not financial advice.
Oh, it's going to be financial. No, I know. So what is so infuriating about like that juxtaposition is like this character is giving her all this like very stock, like nothing exceptional or interesting about this financial advice, right? About like maybe you should sell some of the stock and like maybe you should diversify your portfolio, like not in those words, but and so they're not treated as if the advice is bad. Like the movie isn't saying, look at this noob or this, you know, fuddy-duddy, they don't know anything about investing. Like that's they're presenting it as like, yeah, but this is like a social movement, you know. Yeah. This is like us fighting the man, and I'm like, this is your finances. Fight the man with something else.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I'm glad that some people made money. It's a weird thing to like rally behind. And a part of me is like, is anyone really hurting here with the as much as you think they're going to be hurting?
Yeah, so I guess, and so for me, like there's so many pieces of this that come together, and it's good that we're doing this together because I'm really interested in your perspective because, you know, we have a bit of a generation gap between us. And they even allude to like the Robin Hood guys. And the Robin Hood guys are their own separate issue. I could do a whole podcast screaming about that. Someday maybe there will be a movie for us to do that. But, you know, they say like, oh, this came out of Occupy Wall Street. And I'm like, I'm first and foremost who thought like Occupy Wall Street was really stupid. I was like, what was the point of this? What were you trying to accomplish? What did you think was going to happen? This isn't a movement. This is you sitting in a park. Like, this is an activism. What do you... I don't think that accomplished anything, and I am befuddled as to why anybody thought it would.
I'm trying to remember, because Occupy Wall Street was like 2008, I think. And so I was in 8th grade.
Oh, Jesus.
Never mind.
I guess too big a generation gap.
I guess what I'll say is like, yeah, and that's why I don't remember as much of like, what was going on like in the moment. What I remember most about Occupy Wall Street was, you know, it was the big financial crisis. A lot of people were hurting, and like it was kind of one of the early ways that I remember being introduced to the idea about the wealth gap.
Right.
And how
I mean, it did give us like the 1%, right?
Yeah.
As like a slogan, for sure. Mm-hmm. So it accomplished something.
Yeah, and so I think, like having not like been as like active at that point in the moment, I think, for like what I remember is the educational aspect or bringing awareness of the 1% and how the system is not as equal as we think it is.
Yeah. No, so I guess, yes, it did raise awareness, but I was like, I need you to do something. That's it. Because I'm, whatever. I'm a child of like the AIDS movement. Mm-hmm. So like I'm used to people at least making a quilt. So so then this movie just sort of like kind of upped that for like another generation, or reinforced this idea of like, okay, yeah, Wall Street is rigged and they're just out to get us and we're going to fight the man. And you're like, it is rigged. I don't think you really understand how it's rigged, because what you are doing is not fighting the system in any realistic way. And the only people you're really hurting is kind of yourselves. And so I found it just like, on the base level, infuriating as financial advice. Like I said, I want it banned. I was like, no one ever watched this movie. Please don't hold one stock and put all your money in it, ever. Please do not do that thing. Please don't. It's just not how investing works. Number one. And then number two, I found it infuriating on the sort of David and Goliath more symbolic level, because I was like, this holding GameStop diamond hands movement did not really accomplish in any real way what the movie thought it did, or like was trying to inspire you to believe in.
Yeah, and this is kind of getting back to like my thought of like internet versus like real world of mm-hmm. like, with the internet, you've been able to build all these communities that you maybe wouldn't have had before. And in some ways, like, I guess maybe this is not the greatest example, because this did make it out into like the real world. Like they showed clips of Colbert talking about it. And obviously there was the whole congressional hearing, and, mm-hmm. Like things happened. But in some ways, I feel like, especially in the beginning, like if you were not involved in this community, you would have like no idea what's going on. In that, like if you like are not on Reddit, or if you're not on like the YouTube streaming, it's like almost this like contained thing. And then it kind of burst, and then it came out into the real world. And because you have like eventually in the movie they bring in the parents of Gil, mm-hmm. and they're like, what are you doing? Like, what do you mean you're not selling? Like,
yeah. I think like, the movie sort of ends on this message of like, everybody wrote off retail investors, but we showed them what the power of like, the collective can do. With the internet to organize us as individual investors, we were able to move the market. Mm-hmm. And then, so immediately now there are algorithms out there trolling Reddit to try to predict which the next meme stock is, right? Like, so there's like, immediately Wall Street was like, oh, but we have the power and the technology. We'll figure a way around this too. And so I think there was just a sense of like, we the people together united can do this thing. And you're like, okay, this is not how you do it, number one. And number two, again, like, I'm not sure what you think you accomplished. Like, yes, they did put that one hedge fund out of business, and people have been a lot more conservative in their short selling since, which is good. Again, I already warned you about my bias. Like, it totally showed Robinhood up. Because what's interesting, too, on that front, like, they're getting sued by all their customers for having frozen trading.
Yeah.
But, like, that wasn't illegal, which seems a little surprising to me.
Yeah, I thought it would be illegal. Because, I saw that either they just paid out or they're in the process of a class action lawsuit. And there is somewhat in the movie, there is a somewhat downness at the end of, like, they talk about how, like, no charges were filed. Yes. And, like, the movie does, in a way, acknowledge that nothing really changed. Yeah. In terms of, like you said, that some things were changed with Wall Street and short selling and how they look at stock options. But, GameStop's back to, like, $16 a share now. And the SEC didn't really step in. The most that is kind of coming out of it is, like, this class action lawsuit.
Yeah, and I think... Right, and, like... So I think what I kind of wanted to see, and sort of the great, quote-unquote, like, fraud perpetrated on the American people was making us all have to invest our own money when so many of us have no idea how to do that, right? Like, moving everybody off of a defined benefit pension system into a defined contribution 401k system, and now forcing everyone to save for their own retirement. Where, we all know, we've all seen the news and headlines, like, there's critical shortfalls, people aren't saving, they haven't saved enough, and it's like, also, and people don't know how to do it.
Right. There's a big lack of financial literacy.
There really is, and it's so interesting to me. So I find that as someone who sort of works in this space and just has always kind of done her own investing and taxes, I was like, the two things people seem most terrified of are taxes and investing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, on the tax front, let me all assure you, if you screw up your taxes, you're going to get a letter from the IRS, and they're going to be like, you screwed up your taxes, now you owe this amount, and you're going to pay it, and that's going to be the end of the story. Yeah. Like, this is not you are not Willie Nelson. It's not that scary. You're going to be fine. Yeah. But investing is really scary.
Yeah, and I think investing's also, it's odd because, most people do it through their 401k, right, as you pointed out. And in some ways that, depending on, like, what you choose, it is kind of predetermined for you. Like, at least initially you're dumped into, like, I don't know if it's technically a mutual fund, but similar, where it's like, it's a combo of a bunch of different stocks based on the risk level, depending on how many years you're going to retire.
It varies widely.
Oh, okay.
I've worked in jobs where I was literally able to pick out every specific fund I was in.
Oh, interesting.
And I've worked in jobs where they're like, we're going to pick all the funds for you. Like, how conservative or risky do you want it to be? Right?
Oh, interesting.
So it really does vary widely. And then there was also sort of, like, one of the things that Enron changed was how much you could... of your 401k could be invested in the company stock. Because that's what Enron did, was reward all the employees with company stock. And then when it went bankrupt, all their employees were left holding the bag.
Yeah, and some companies still do it. Like, I know...
You can still do it. There's a limit.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So, and I love telling this fact because it's like a little known piece of what happened with the Enron bankruptcy, was that the only people who were okay, the only employees who came out okay from the Enron bankruptcy were the unionized employees, because the union ran their retirement funds, and the union didn't think it was a good idea to have that much money in Enron stock. So they had their stuff in safer investments, and they didn't have their 401ks wiped out to the extent that...
Okay.
But, so yeah, I mean, I do think that so much of us now have, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, like reasonable people can disagree with me on this, are holding the whole reins of their kind of financial future now. And to me, it's like criminal to have a movie come out and just sort of glorify very terrible investment advice. Like, I was screaming at the screen. Like, I was incensed. I just came out so irate. And I was like, this is bad and this is dangerous. People already don't know how to invest. Like, do not tell them to go to Wall Street Bets and buy one stock and hold it forever.
Yeah, I do agree with that, because I think, going in as like an, out of college, with some like financial experience, like going into this movie, I could just like have a good time and laugh at the memes and, laugh throughout the movie. But I would be curious to see like how younger people perceive the movie, because investing is so strange in some ways, because you have a lot of control, but then there's also the worry about losing it all, because it's kind of like gambling. And I think, and then there's also all this stuff about like, do you get a financial advisor? Do you not get a financial advisor? And then there's like the fiduciary financial advisors. How many fees do they take from you? And then like at that point, like it just like becomes too much, and it's like, it's not worth it. Like, let me just stop doing this.
Yeah. I tried to find a financial advisor who I could just pay them for financial advice.
Oh, and not to actually invest it for you?
Yeah, that thing does not exist. I mean, literally, it does not exist. And
I'm not surprised, but...
The only people I could find who would do it told me I had to have... Some told me I had to have a minimum of $2 million in assets, and some told me I had a minimum of $1 million in assets. And I'm like, if you're not investing my money, why do you care how much of it I have?
Right.
So it was a grift. Like, I couldn't just pay someone completely objectively to give me this advice. And I was like, this is infuriating.
Yeah. I feel like the closest you get to that is like financial YouTubers or like financial articles that do like some advice about
good old Susie Orman.
And to your point about like the minimums about like your account balance and stuff like that, then it gets this perspective of investing is only for the wealthy.
Yeah.
And there are ways to invest, I think, even depending on what company you go with, there are ways outside of even Robinhood to invest, but only with like a couple $100 and only inputting so much a month. But especially if you don't have a lot of money to lose, it can be scary to even start.
Again, I just want to say for any of our audience or any of our listeners, like, this is 100% nothing to be ashamed of. You shouldn't know this. It's not taught to you. It's confusing. There's a lot of terrible advice out there. Really scary, bad advice. And we have a lot of like sacred cows in America, like home ownership. Right. And I'm like, that's the only way to invest in something. So I'm sort of sensitive to that. But then, I got so mad at the movie for doing something that I thought was really dangerous in giving out this very terrible advice.
Yeah, and I think, like for all the reasons that we discussed, it's scary, and, there are parts, or like, if you don't have parents or people around you who can give you the financial literacy, then you're kind of stuck, on your own trying to figure it out. And that can be very scary. So it's another way that the system is definitely rigged against a lot of people. But also don't hold one stock.
Yeah. But again, it's scary. The system is rigged, but you don't have a choice. You are going to have to invest for your own retirement. If you have children, you are going to have to invest to pay for their college. Like, you can't not invest. Like,
and even you have to almost invest outside of your 401k to meet certain goals.
Yeah. But I didn't think of it I didn't think of it as a story of like what happens on the internet, like sort of breaking through into the real world. And I do think you're right. Like, that is also a story and a perspective that they're telling about the power of the internet to organize real world collective action in a very surprising way in the financial markets.
Yeah, because I'm of like two minds, where sometimes I look at stuff on TikTok. This is my own personal experience. Like, I look at stuff on TikTok and I'm like so invested in something, and then I get off of TikTok and I'm like, oh, no one else is like thinking about this. And then other times, like this GameStop incident, things are like happening and they're so strange, and then they break out into the real world and affect actual change. And so I did think the movie did do a good job of like highlighting kind of how internet culture works.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, I thought that was useful, and I think that's useful now. Like, I didn't really think of that perspective because I was just stewing in my own rage. I think that's true, and I think what the movie unwittingly does well is tell you about the positives, but also the negatives of that. Of, you know, sort of getting high on your own supply, like not using expertise or reliable sources for things, taking it and running with it, and what that actually means for, you know, like QAnon is also an internet community that broke into the real world through like Pizzagate shooting, you know, like they're not always forces for good.
Right. Absolutely. Or absolutely not always good.
Yeah. I don't even know what to give this as a social impact score because I want it to be like negative because I'm like, don't ever see this movie.
Yeah, I think, I was, when I was thinking about the eventual score, I was thinking mine's probably gonna be pretty low, just because I think the incident was very impactful.
Yeah.
And like how it unfolded in real time and like what was going on. I don't think this movie will be very impactful.
Me neither. Partly because it wasn't a good enough movie. I think partly honestly because it's too soon. Like, people need kind of time and reflection and then be like, oh yeah, that happened. What was that all about? Like,
right.
It's far enough past it to have that sort of nostalgia instinct of like, what was that all about?
Well, I guess to that point, and talking about like bad financial advice, like, yeah, a lot of the people who are seeing this probably lived through the incident.
Right.
And so like, whose mind is really being changed by this movie? Like, most likely whatever you thought during the incident, you're going to think again at the result of this movie. So maybe even if there is like bad, what's it called? Like indirectly bad financial advice, like it may not even affect that many people because people most likely already know about this and had an opinion then and will keep that opinion now.
Fair enough. So low impact at the end of the day, either way.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably give it like a 3.
Okay. Standing by my 1. All right, so tell us something we should see, do, right.
I'm going to recommend the movie Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. I was partially reminded of it during Dumb Money because the actress who plays Riri in the movie is in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies and does a good job. Well, she does a good job in both movies, but is also really good and funny in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. And I think it's also very funny and a great, like, look at Gen Z and, like, how they talk and certain internet phrases, like, make its way into how they, like, communicate with each other. It's not about the internet at all, like this movie. It definitely is gory, but I found it to be a very fun and entertaining movie with some violence.
Gotcha. Well, I'm going to recommend in the tying into like looking back on the past and what kind of perspective you have. So I've been going through the back catalog of the podcast You're Wrong About. And they did a 4-part series on the DC snipers, which I lived through and I was wrong about it. All of it. This is a really good look back at how they came to be the DC snipers. All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed this episode. We hope you learned to diversify your portfolio. We leave you with one thing. Let it be that from all your listening of movies that matter. Reach out to us. Leave a YouTube comment. Leave a post on our website, moviesthatmatterpodcast.com, which has some merch on it if you want some of that stuff. moviesmatterpod@gmail.com. Send us an email, let us know. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
See you next time.